Welcome to a brand new episode of Wim Whiteboard Wednesday. Today's session is around query troubleshooting and troubleshoot your mappings. Troubleshooting queries starts by understanding how we get the content inside our index. So you need to know how a connector works. So most connectors are working as follows. They first start by using your account or a token to authenticate against the source system. Once the source system says everything is okay, we go to the next step, but this could already fail. So you will have errors in your configuration. We will see that later on. The next step is get me all my documents. So all documents. That is a call against the API of the source system. Again, that could fail if the account does not have the proper rights. And then the next one is get me a specific document. So that specific document needs normally other privileges. So that could also fail. So when all of this is successful, then we start getting the content and pushing it inside our index. Now that we retrieved the documents from the connector, then we need to push it into our index, as mentioned before. But there's a whole process going on here. So we have our documents. Those documents are going into a pre-extension phase, which is essentially a Python script which could do a little bit of manipulation of your data. Then it goes into our actual converter. So a converter converts the document to text. Then the text is being mapped. So the mappings of the metadata from the original to our Coveo fields is being mapped. And then we are going into a post-conversion script. A post-conversion script is essentially, again, a Python extension which could clean up your data. And then finally, we are ready to really save it inside our index. There could be issues here with this specific script. So that could fail. The mapping could fail. And the conversion could fail. So all of these are being monitored in the log browser, which we'll have a look at later on. Now that we know the indexing process and the mapping process, let's have a look at how you can examine if something goes wrong with indexing. The first thing you can see is that on a source, you see that you have a last operation failed message. Using the activity, you can examine that specific error message and you see that you have an unauthorized request problem. You could dig into what is happening and you see that we probably mismatched our URL. So we need to fix that problem, and after that we start rebuilding our content. Now that we have fixed our connector issue, now it's time to look at the log browser to see what is happening during indexing. We can filter by source. And now we can see that all the stages are being mentioned here and you can examine them. It's best to first look at all the URLs and then specifically go into a single one. We can double click on it, then it's copied, and then we can filter by it and examine what is happening. One thing to notice here is that we have an error in one of our extensions. And the extension contains simply an error. So we need to look into what is happening with that specific extension. As revealed in the log browser, there was an extension script which contained bad code. And that's this very surprisingly bad extension. And as you can see here, it contains a metadata field which is not there. If you would create a proper extension, you would have a try except procedure here to make sure that you are not doing anything illegal. And now we simply need to correct the script, save it, and rebuild our source. When you have a problem with a script, all the items need to be processed, so you need to do a rebuild of your full source. Now that we have fixed our connector issues and our extension issues, now it's time to look at the content browser. We open in the content browser and now you see that there are no items found. This could have multiple causes. One of them could be that the pipeline is restricting our content. So in order to check if the content is properly in the index, we set it to empty for internal testing. Right now I'm expecting 7 results. So there's something going on, probably with the security. So what I could do is I could view all the content. Now I see 7 results, and that's what I was expecting. So now it might be that there is an issue with the security. So I could have a look at the properties to investigate what is going on with our permissions. So we could see here that there are certain permissions set. Am I a member of this community? And we can have a look at who has access to this document. My name is here, so I'm available to look at this content. So the content which was not there before, we can examine why that is not showing up. So this one is not showing up, and the reason for that is that the permissions here are in an error, as you can see. So something is going on with the permissions of these specific records. And as you can see, there are no users listed in the permission set. So we need to fix that. Now that we have fixed our security issues, now it's time to look at why is the results not showing in the search query pipeline. How is that happening? Well, let's have a look first at the query pipeline. Because the query pipeline could have maybe, and that's the first step to look at, a specific filter which is exactly what we were expecting. It's not showing this specific source in the search interface. So we will remove this restriction, and now all of a sudden when we go back to our content browser and we will navigate to our Facebook 2 entry, you will see that the results are popping up. So there was a mismatch in the filter setting. So that's the first step to check if your search result does not bring back any results. To troubleshoot front-end problems with queries, you can use the following procedure. The first thing you can do is enable the debug is true flag. You could also do that in the query pipeline. Once you have set the flag, there will be additional information reported in the search API call. When I now start searching for content and start refining, you will see here in the network call the additional content reported by the search API. And as you can see, we have the advanced expression that's activated by clicking on the facet, the expression the user entered, but also the constant expression. You see a lot of information here, also the pipeline which was used to execute the query request. So using all these parameters, you then can go into the content browser to execute the search and see where it goes wrong. We have investigated our content, so our content is inside the index. Now it's time to troubleshoot our mappings. So what is happening from a mapping perspective? So what is happening is your original content has metadata. For example, an author field. In the Coveo index, you have created a field, and that field contains, or that has the name, my author. So what needs to happen on the source level is that we need to map this field to this specific field in Coveo. And that's where we are using mappings for. So if the field is not there in Coveo, You can map whatever you want, but it will never be stored. So the field needs to exist, the mapping needs to exist, and of course the field in your original repository needs to exist. So how do you troubleshoot that? Well, let's look into the details. So we have created a field in our Facebook source. And that field is called My Media URL. So when we look at the properties in our content browser, that field is not there. So how could this happen? So first thing you need to check is our field defined? Because if the field is not there, the mapping will go nowhere. So our field is called My Media URL. The My Media URL is there. So that is right. Now let's look at our source. Did we map, or how is the source configured? And as you can see, the source is configured into the media URL field. So from the original to the media URL, and because this is a generic REST API, this is a temporary field. And so we need to check if there is a field mapping done on media URL to my media URL. Let's have a look. Inside our mappings, we can check if anything was done on the media URL. It's not there. So if the mapping is not there, it will never work. So what we need to do is we need to add the mapping, and then the field will be populated. Since the field is not there, let's add the field. We select the field here, My Media URL, and this is mapping against our media URL. And as you can see, this is the temporary field from the generic REST connector. We apply the mapping and we save and rebuild the source. And that's it. Hope to see you next time in the next episode.